Welcome to GovCon Unscripted, where we dive into the unfiltered stories and strategies from all around the world of government contracting. Join host Chelsea Roberts as she explores how to navigate, thrive, and win in this complex but lucrative industry.
All right. Hey, everyone, and welcome back to GovCon Unscripted. I'm your host, Chelsea Roberts, CEO of Collaborative Compositions, and today I've got with us Paul Serotkin. Paul is a senior government contracts consultant for the Serotkin Group. Paul, who are you and what do you do?
Chelsea, first of all, it's so nice to be here. I think the audience is best informed by three chunks of my life, and that's where it leads to right now. One was I was a small business advocate. I worked for an organization that supported issues in Capitol Hill. And a little side note there, when President Reagan signed the SBIR bill, which will be very familiar to many of your audiences, I was right there in the Rose Garden when he signed it in 1982. So it's a highlight. And of course, we're going to talk about SBIR today, and everybody's familiar with and the acceleration of small business technology insertion. Secondly, it was in mergers and acquisitions. I ran an M&A department for a mid-tier company and also had my own group called Minuteman Ventures, which worked helping typical small business GovCon owners sell their company. And third, I managed smaller companies in the socio and small GovCon space for many years. And the last year or so, I've been a mentor for groups like the SBA SCORE and something called Boston Business Mentors. And I've also had my consulting group working with companies in strategy and linking that to operations. But the common bond is somewhere in the government ecosystem, contracting ecosystem across my entire career.
Wow, That's quite the experience.
Yeah, no, it really is. And even within the GovCon management, there's a commonality to all the government aspect to it. And so I've supported companies that did social science research in Iraq and Afghanistan, armed guard services, air traffic control, simulation. What do I know about each of those things? Not a heck of a lot, but I do know how to run the businesses and the operation behind them.
Wow, that's quite the breadth and depth of experience that I appreciate you bringing the show today, by the way. That's fantastic. So I'm sure that you've got plenty of lessons learned that you have built up over the years and collected. And I'm curious, why don't you share a couple of those lessons that you've learned over all those different experiences with our audience?
Yes, the lessons learned changed a lot last January 20th or so. Right now, I guess it's not a lesson so much as I'm straddling the fence as to whether I'm entering this new period with excitement or dread, really. And the changes have been so massive and the complexity is on steroids. There's no question about it. And the people really, companies, from startup, obviously, to early stage, to mature companies, they really need firms like and people like yourself with really deep dive, I'll say hand holding, that's not doing it justice, but nonetheless across the realm. It's just, I don't know how you do it without it even. I'm learning new things truly every day. And also, we don't know where the unintended consequences are going to come from. They're out there already, and you have to be pretty savvy to be there. One thing that I keep questioning is what's of these changes are the normal pendulum swing and which are going to be with us for the long term. I think there's going to be a lot more that are going to be more long-term changes than they are the normal pendulum swing. But those of us who've been in the sector for some time realize what certainly contract type going to be, what will be happening and will come back, and it often does. But in a lot of cases, I don't think some of these vectors are going to be changing direction. The commerciality and the changes in FAR Part 12, that's going to be here for a period, probably forever, where AI traits our work assumptions, our workflows, the contract, the use of it by government and also by industry. It's going to be here. We're just still in the early stages of all that. The innovation to the prioritization on innovation. And as I think your listeners probably know, with the Small Business Innovation Research Act, the SBIR bill, it stopped. It was not reauthorized for a period of 5 or 6 months, I think, at least. Finally get back in. And it's a very exciting time for small companies to participate in that. That valley of death, I just listened to another podcast that's saying, yet another federal official say, we're going to do our best to help companies get over that valley. We're going to do our best to get there, and there's a lot more authority that we have to help. I know they have this boost fund that is supposed to come in and allow, which is going to supplement SBIR and other R&D functions. It's a $30 million program. You can go up to $30 million from a sole source that helps. And they want to link all the authorities that are out there. Like I was a mentor for an AFWorks firm a few years ago. But the one guy I talk about was the layering of authorities, to layer them on top of each other, not have them in siloed. So small companies can take advantage of that. It's still not a straightforward path, but a lot more a lot more opportunities than had been. The discretion of the CO, they talk a lot about that. I don't know what you're seeing in your world. Curious comparing about some of the notes. Are they going to be trained in that way? Is the culture going to change that way? Are contracting offices really going to have that more discretion as the new regs are suggesting they should? So that's things that are not going to change. I think the school's out, though, on a number of other areas. I don't know if you saw it. This is coming out in mid-May, but they just issued this new executive order on fixed price contracts being the default. Or if you have T&M and labor hour contracts, how do you transition if you're a services company? So I'm hesitating in part because it's really ambiguous. It's the rules out there, what's going to happen in practice. So we'll see if that happens. The relaxation of some of the cost and pricing data, there's a reason we have the cost and pricing data, right? It's a bureaucracy, but it's built up over time and for a lot of different reasons. Some of the rollbacks of the social disadvantaged companies, we have a new administration could be here in 2.5 years. And it wouldn't surprise me right now, just like the Heritage Foundation came out with Project 2025. And last time, if there's not a counterweight on the other side saying they're going to bring back DEI or some version of it at some point. There's a reason we have diversity in the workplace. It's a good thing usually. So it's the regulation. So again, I have that question of whether that's going to be out there or not. And we're living through this. We got a $1.5 billion or trillion dollar request for DoD. Okay, we'll see how that plays through, but that's hundreds of billions of dollars in play that could swing either way. So to me, it's a tremendously exciting time. I always find the government contracting world fascinating to begin with, but now, like I said, it's on steroids before. And all this, I'll say there's a tremendous cottage industry that's built up. I don't say that disparagingly. I'm part of it. You're part of it in your own way. And we all try, I think companies need to take advantage of those resources that are out there. So I don't know if there's so many lessons as there are just trying to figure it out and doing the head scratching together and getting through to the other side.
Yeah, and you bring up such a good point. There's so much change going on right now. There's so much turmoil and chaos really in the market right now. And companies laid out their plan, even maybe laid out their plan for federal business entry, and they did it before the administration transitioned in, maybe even September, August, July of the previous year before the administration came in. And I would venture a guess that those folks that had built that plan out and laid the best foundation that they could foresee them being able to do, and then having this administration come in and make all of these changes and have all of this sort of adjustment that we're seeing in the market, I would venture a guess that those plans aren't necessarily as helpful or applicable as they might have been at the time that they were developed. And it's almost like right now things are moving so fast. How do you build a plan? How do you even start to venture down that road of putting a plan together that can outlast these big market changes that we're seeing? And I think you've got some suggestions and some thoughts on how you can develop an adaptable business plan and how you can put something out there that's going to help you through this time instead of becoming a limiter for you.
Yeah, the first thing is write it down, just like my father always told me. It's really on my website if you want to go there at serotkingroup.com. But basically, I put together a notional business plan of a fictional company and worked through all the key elements. And I think certainly the early business stage in government contracting. But even as you start getting mature, even 1, 2, 3 or more years, because now pivot becomes more important, is to lay out those goals, have measurable targets, put timeframes to it. I think the difference between the business plan of mid-2026 and prior years is you need to look at it more frequently. And probably instead of an annual or semi-annual, try to look at it quarterly. And this is tried and true. Share with your employees. Don't make it a secret just among the top leaders and employees, even of a 10-person company. Everybody needs to be involved. Certainly, even in its development and modification as well as its execution. So have an execution plan beyond that with timetables and assignments and what expectations are of individual parties. So I do think a lot about that, the business plan itself, and it forces people, it's a forcing action. It pressure tests the integration of strategy and compliance and back office operations. One of the hallmarks of this industry is the specs in there. So I think that's got to be, those are important. So a business plan, it's really a tried and true thing. We've all worked through them, but often companies do not do that. And it's a good discipline for themselves. It's a good discipline because it forms the basis, the background for a pitch deck, whether that's to potential investors, whether it's to bankers. Having dealt with a number of banks over the years, they really do appreciate a disciplined approach to it that becomes out in slides oftentimes. And I think it has many uses. It has many applications in that regard. So business planning is key. The business plan itself is important, I think, as well.
Now, you mentioned reviewing it or touching it more frequently. I'm probably one of the first to admit that I may have shelved my business plan at some point, and I have not necessarily taken it off the shelf and looked at it, but
You're so successful growing so fast.
I think about it though, and I also work with companies that have a little bit of what I call shiny object syndrome in the leadership. And that tends to be a habit of redirecting and chasing things on a moment's notice that might not necessarily be in line or included in your business plan. And I feel like there's a fine line there to walk between updating it regularly and throwing the baby out with the bathwater and going in a whole new direction every other week when you see something that looks like it might be aligned. So where's that balance? Are there big changes happening? Are we shredding the whole thing and doing it over every quarter? Or is there some substance there that should outlast the quarterly changes?
It depends.
My favorite
question.
answer in government contracting, by the way.
I mean, I tend to favor focus and trying to stick with it, really. And then there's the opportunistic. If it gets opportunistic, then you take advantage of it.
Right.
But it's so classic that companies try to diversify themselves to such a degree that it often doesn't work. And nowadays, it's really not, now that you're talking about it, I think it's even more important to double down and focus, since the relationship with the contract and program officer or managers becomes more important and they have more discretion. And you will, at least theoretically, have the opportunity to expose your strengths, hide your weaknesses, and find out what the customer is talking about. And they're supposed to be able to talk to you more about that. I guess I lean towards sticking with what you know well and building on top of that. And it's actually, I wanted to mention that I wasn't going to mention is this notion of a small companies, the smart literature says, and I listen to commentators like yourself probably all the time saying the pathway to government contracting success is often through subcontracting, build your way up, build your quals. It's more important than ever for a small company to continue to focus. And that focus is now the CEOs and the program managers are supposed to be able to talk to the customers, to the clients, to the industry more than ever. And so if double down on focus wherever you can and build that relationship out. So I think that's important to have that. So I favor that balance you talked about. I favor staying with focus, not updating every quarter, and yet being smart about strategic, taking advantage of opportunities that come your way.
And you mentioned something about subcontracting. Can you go into that a little bit further and let us know what you're thinking about the strategy behind sub? If you should try to grow there, or if it makes more sense to come in as a prime now.
Yeah. So the smart money for small companies is always mostly to come in as a subcontractor, build your way up, build your quals, build the points for the scorecard-based competitions. So that always seems to make sense. And yet last week, I experienced yet again another prime moving work, taking work away from the company I'm working with, moving it back inside, and manufacturing reasons why this had to be, and literally bullying their way to this position. My gut says if you have certain qualifications and experience, such as having the client relationship, having outsourced experts such as yourself and some outsourced contract and accounting folks, don't be afraid to step in Try to become not a huge prime contract, but don't be afraid to go there. And I think it'll be helpful. And again, I'm saying this probably a little out of exasperation for the past week, but companies can do that. If you're in the government space, even if you haven't won a prime contract before, don't be as afraid as some of the commentators suggest that you should be out there. So I realize I've been at this for a long time, so I've got a pretty good comfort level that I can help guide a company through this. But I think companies should really take it under consideration, because I've just seen it too often. I don't know if that's been your experience as well, Chelsea. And maybe I've done this as a prime myself, although I try not to, but they can bring work in-house too
Yeah.
readily.
Yeah, I have definitely seen the downside or the bad side of prime contracting relationships. And I have found that there are businesses that really value their subcontractors, that really value their supply chain. But at the end of the day, they're still a business and they still need to look out for their bottom line, and they still need to look out for their profit margins and for their contracting basis. And if it makes more sense, or if they can make more money doing it themselves, then that's just a smart business decision. And it's no slight against the sub. It's no direct insult or intentionally doing harm to their supply chains. But I noticed that it tends to have a trickle down effect into those subcontractors, and it unsettles them. It makes them think, did I do something wrong? Is there something that I could have done better? And it can put them into a position where they feel like they aren't necessarily in the best spot to be able to step up and facilitate and nurture that relationship with their government contractor and try to work into a prime contracting relationship with them. When in reality, most of the time, it's dollars and cents. It's the bottom line. They have to make sure that they're taking account and taking stock of the things that they can potentially do in-house. If it just makes more sense for them to do that on the dollars and cents side, then that's what they're going to do. And it usually doesn't really have much to do with the performance or the behavior or the engagement with the sub. But I think a lot of companies that are in that subcontracting position, especially the ones that have that direct end user relationship, they are in just an ideal spot to go and speak up and have those conversations with their government customer and explain to them, say, we would love to continue working with you. This has been such a great relationship. Our prime is no longer going to facilitate that. What makes the most sense to make sure that we can continue to provide that relationship, that we can continue to provide those services, the tools, the support, the products, whatever, so that they can ultimately maintain that positioning with their government customer. If they just all of a sudden don't show up to work one day and their government customers, where did that really great sub go? That's just an unfortunate loss. And it's the primes that are going to have some reason always to say, well, we just felt like it would be better for you. We felt like you would get more if we did it all, right? And that's never the case. And that's never the truth with the small businesses that are getting the short end of that stick. So I think having the confidence in building your past performance and building that rapport with your end customer is so critically important, especially for companies throughout the supply chain, to make sure that they are able to have somebody to go back to and say, hey, we do still really want to work with you. We do still want to figure out the best way to provide this, if that's under an alternative prime or if that's being a prime ourselves. And those are moves that companies can make and should feel more comfortable making, I would think.
Yes, beautifully articulated. Of course, we're just a week out from bills being filed to get rid of the women-owned small business program. And so there's some of those few other options for companies, but leaving that aside. So yeah, no stated, Chelsea. One of the things I also want to say is, as much as things have changed, there are a number of pieces of advice and that have stayed the same. I think you just have to double down more on where you have been. And some of those are, so for example, the aspect of BD and business development as a team sport within, especially in the government contracting world, is really critical. Those people, in fact, the issue we're just talking about, how do you build that relationship more tightly with the client to have your people on the front line, the operations folks also have a BD mindset and see what contract can grow and facilitate recompetition and procurement shaping. One of these, I'm going to quote Drew here, the blog you wrote on the tribes, how each tribe is different. And I think one of the things you said was rack versus bunk or those kind of things. And between the language and the nomenclature and learning it and practicing it all the time. It sounds a little superficial, but it's not. It really works well. So I think doubling down on that aspect. Right now, we have a tremendous amount of obligated funds out there and more than ever. So here we are talking in mid-May, and companies have to really be ever more mindful of that type of thing. Capital backup plans, I guess I call them. Really, you certainly should have a relationship with a banker, and you should always be meeting with more than one bank all the time, because you don't know what the criteria of the lender may be. Now, there's senior lending, obviously, in this space. Some are non-traditional. There's very aggressive. Parabolis is one firm, obviously, that's out there. There's a new firm that does the same type of thing called Ascended Federal, which also is a lot more upfront financing. So those types of relationships should be built regularly. Even if you think things are strong and your line of credit is now, relationships change somewhat. I'm a director and shareholder in a USAID company that was doing very well last January. Now it took a tremendous hit, very sad in many aspects, and their lending relationship obviously necessarily changed. So just to really sharpen that point, we talked about the idea of templating for like the RFIs. I mean, the things are going to be more, the turnaround is going to be great, faster for RFIs, sources sought, RFPs themselves. So having more in the can and using AI goes without saying these days, is to get smarter and to build, to understand what the customer's looking for and how you can create that kind of upfront pre-positioning as best you can. So we talked about for years, but really to take them ever more seriously and dedicate more focused resources and measure how those resources are doing, I think is imperative at this time.
Now, you mentioned something in there through my interest, and it was that you have to have alignment between your operations and your strategy. And it reminds me of something that my parents used to say, which is like every person that works for your company is a salesperson. Every single person, if they have any interactions with other people, whether it be your customers or your partners or your suppliers or your bankers or any other organization that might be, or individual that might be interacting with your business, they have a role in that sales pathway. It's not that typical, hey, you want to go buy a candy, you want to buy this $1 candy bar, you want to buy that, you want to buy the, hey, it's not that typical sort of pushy or aggressive sales function, but it is a representation of your organization in a way that may or may not encourage somebody to potentially in the future have some sales with you, have some procurement with you. So I think that that's constantly overlooked. And it's the folks that are in engineering, they don't need to worry about it because we've got folks that are the face, they're not, but those engineers are probably going to be working with a customer at some point. They're probably going to have some interaction and have to build or develop alongside that customer to make sure that what they're providing is sufficient or aligned with what the needs are. So how do you suggest companies make sure that kind of alignment exists within their organization and they don't have folks at various levels going off and presenting different messages, conveying the company in various ways that aren't necessarily the way that you want to be conveyed?
Yeah, so communication is key, obviously. For the senior leadership, you can't say it enough. To meet with your people, to be open with your people is important. I've worked with CEOs who take that very seriously, and others who really pride themselves on being opaque. And I don't think that really works. I think people do value transparency, and they may not appreciate the message that comes through in the transparent message and communication, but nonetheless, it has value because you just want people on your staff who are going to be as aligned with as possible. Working sort of apropos with that, I'm working on a proposal right now, which is representative. There's 4 different scoring mechanisms. I think 20% was organizational, financial, another 30 to 40% was technical, which of course is win themes, which is strategy and how you're going to understand the customer strategy, try to respond to it as best you can. So that's a proposal manager aspect, but that proposal manager is really representing the entire company as they put the whole thing together. And somebody's got to have oversight for that. It may be a proposal manager who's doing the proposal work, but that person has to reflect the expectations and pursuits of senior leadership. So it's communication. It's really looking at tying the front office, as it were, the strategy to the back office and reinforcing that message all the time. Maybe I've read a lot of posts by you, so maybe I'm going to step back to you, but I think that you also wrote about the different flavors of BD operations. I think it was one of yours.
Yeah.
She didn't pay me, folks, to say all this, but in fact, this development operations are different. And don't presume that because you're bidding up against bucking up a large company, that they do everything right and they have everything buttoned down. A smaller company can do it more streamlined and perhaps be more coordinated than a large company. So BD, again, is that the whole cycle, it reflects on the back and front office alignment. So I think that's some things to keep in mind.
Yeah, I find that it really does take a very consistent and very transparent mode and method of communication to the entire company, not just the people that you think are talking about your company, not just the people that you think are representing your company, because at some point, everybody in your company is going to represent that company. And if they go off on some tangent or like a rabbit hole that isn't representative of how you want your company to be conveyed, then that's just one more area to create some confusion or to create some lack of certainty around what it is that your company is trying to do and how you're trying to achieve these things for your government customers. So I think you're absolutely right. And I am adamant that is a very common problem amongst organizations of all sizes. Like the largest contractors probably have the hardest time with that because there's so many people that you have to try to align with, that you have to make sure all on the board, all on the same page, all telling the same story. And when you've got more people to make sure are being consistent, in some cases, it can become a game of telephone, right? You're picking it up, you're saying like, this is the message, and then they're passing it on and passing it on. By the time it gets to the end customer or the end user, they're like, okay, that's what you do. But the reality of it is that it started out as something completely different that you were definitely hoping that would be conveyed appropriately and effectively. And oftentimes it just gets lost in that chain, if not corrected quickly and if not addressed properly, I think, in some of those larger organizations. Absolutely.
Yeah. And smaller and larger, I don't know if that makes a difference. To tie the alignment and it's to align the incentives with that mentality can be helpful. So you may have many people on the team doing the operational work or even the proposal space. Are those people going to be incented? Is that built into their bonus process? This is good to the leader, of the group, or can that money and funds be shared down the line if the group grows? And reinforcing that everyone's a salesperson type attitude. Incentives need to align with what the company wants to accomplish.
Definitely. Incentive alignment, I think, is a problem across government. I think that's always a constant question, which is how do we incentivize the right things? And how do we make sure that we're facilitating the right behavior and enabling the right behavior in our company and even in our agency or organization? And that's not an easy question to answer. And I guess I don't know if that's ever been an easy question to answer. So with that, are there things that you see that are still being like the same mistakes are still being made as they were made 10 years ago, as they were made 20 years ago? Are there still things that are consistent in that regard?
Maybe. I wrote a note to myself this morning about bringing this quote forward. I heard a NASA administrator the other day who manages workforce. It was pretty senior within the operation. Had a quote that was interesting, and this comes back to training and perhaps measurement. She said that we, people who are managing operations now, this was government, but there's no reason it couldn't pertain to industry as well. We will be the last generation of leaders that manages an all-human workforce. And so obviously there's going to be some non-human who participate. And I think that was really kind of telling, and it got everybody in the audience interested in terms of what we can learn, what we know now, and pushing it forward. Okay, how are we going to structure our workforce and structure our leaders and train them to maximize that kind of relationship? It sounds like a sort of scary thought that we're managing non-humans and humans, but it's going to come to the fore. It's here now. But we were the last generation to accomplish this, to manage this way. Everybody had a smile and a sense of dread at the same time, I think.
Yeah, that's terrifying.
Yeah, no, exactly. So manage your chop-off, give it vacation, pay it well. So anyway.
Yeah, I think there will be differences in management and management behavior and management strategies because you do have to take into consideration the fact that you're dealing with not an entirely human workforce, and that can create some controversy, some rift, some dissension amongst your ranks to ultimately be able to make sure that all of those pieces are working in harmony and that they all have a really solid and confident understanding of what their role is, what they contribute, how they bring value, and making sure that the folks that you're working with understand that you recognize the value that they bring, and you're not just looking for ways to go off board or offshore or deploy their job as an AI. I think a lot of the reassurance that the employees are probably going to need in this new hybrid AI or robotic future where they're working alongside technology to get their jobs done, I think making sure that they have a sense of the value that they bring and that they're comfortable and confident that you're not just out there to get their job done right now the way they do it, but then next year you're going to be doing it with all AIs. That I think can create some workplace safety and a sense of like a level of comfort with the role that you're serving and the environment that you're in.
That's true. And with the AI aspect, this proposal I'm working on, they clearly say this is a research project, and we want to make sure you are not using artificial intelligence to generate your response. Okay. On one hand, we're saying we need to go full bore into the AI world and throughout the operation. And here we are saying that you can't use AI, we're going to ding you for it. How exactly they tell you that they discern that, I know there are ways to do it, but it's a double-edged sword.
Now, you said also something that I want to just bring up here as we wrap up. And you mentioned that you have been a SCORE mentor. I personally, and my parents, I'm very familiar with SCORE and have leveraged it extensively. I think it's a fantastic resource. But I think that there are so many people out there that still have no idea what SCORE is, that it exists, how they can leverage it. So would you mind just giving folks a little bit of an understanding of what SCORE is, how they might be able to leverage it?
Sure. SCORE is called the Service Corps of Retired Executives. And there's a couple parts to the story. So it's been a program been around since the mid-60s, partly funded by the federal government and partly funded by private donations. SCORE is a national association. And it's a group of thousands of mentors based around the country who are giving of their time in a volunteer way. So you contact SCORE and say, I want help in this particular area. And it's not just government contracting, it's throughout every aspect of business. I happen to work with companies that have an idea or early stage, or mostly early stage companies, or they're mature financial in the commercial world, but want to translate their services or products into the federal space. So it is a great organization. The government defunded SCORE last year, unfortunately. So SCORE as an organization exists. Some of us, I live in the outside Boston, we formed something called Boston Business Mentors, doing the same type of thing. So I recommend SCORE. I recommend other nonprofit, and it's free and volunteer is key there because there are obviously many paying services. SCORE or SCORE type environmental, like this BBM that I reference, I think people can really take advantage of it. I know I've worked very closely with some companies. Sometimes it's the one-off, you get an hour online interview and you go off and that satisfies the client. Other times you really come back on a regular basis to work with them. And I'm reminded the complexity of at least the government contracting world. Every time I work with a new client, I've got a janitorial supplies, I've gotten sort of a box manufacturer. And there's always an angle there that I'm saying, God, I never really thought of that before. And I'm learning. So it's fun for me to figure it out and tell them and to give them a sense of really what the art of the possible. There's certainly plenty of people, at least when the 8A program was active, I've got my 8A certification and now I'm going to win contracts. No, you have more of an advantage than you had before, but you still have the same kind of work. So there's a reality check that we provide. So yes, I would recommend that people take advantage of those mentorship programs. That SCORE is one, and the other organizations are another that I support.
I absolutely love that. I think that SCORE is an invaluable resource. It's phenomenal for every aspect of business, like business planning, social media, financials, like structure, anything that you can think of. They have some sort of mentor and some sort of support, whether it's tools or templates or just that reassurance that there is somebody there who you can ask for advice, you can ask for support in any area that you're struggling in, which I think is just an incredible resource that not enough people leverage. I thank you for sharing a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I know there's chapters in SCORE, for example. The Washington SCORE office I saw, actually watched it recently, is the woman is the SCORE mentor. She's a former senior contracts officer at Northrop Grumman. Where do you get that kind of insight?
Yeah.
It's just fantastic. She'll know things that were there 30, 40 years that you'd never know unless you're on the inside. So there are those kind of people. Yeah.
That's tremendously valuable, tremendously rewarding. And I'm sure that folks are going to want to figure out how to get a hold of you personally through SCORE and through other means. So for those listeners that want to get a hold of you, how do they do that?
Certainly on my LinkedIn, I was just spelling my last name, and that'll be available to people I assume. Yep. Okay. And the email is fine as well. Paul Serotkin at SerotkinGroup.com, SerotkinGroup.com as well.
Perfect. Awesome. Yeah. We are going to get all of those in the show notes. So everybody will have an opportunity to click the link and get directly to where they're going, whether that's a direct email to you or visiting your LinkedIn profile. And there will be abundant opportunities for folks to be able to learn from you, find out more about SCORE, which we'll get that link in the show notes as well. So folks can go and explore that a little bit more and give them an opportunity to get in contact and to have a conversation with you. Thank you so much, Paul. This has been a great conversation today. I really appreciate you being on the show.
Yeah, my pleasure, Chelsea. Take care now.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for listening this week to GovCon Unscripted. Don't forget to share, subscribe, do your part, leave a heart. And if you feel like commenting, we always will engage with you on various platforms. Make sure that you send this to a friend or somebody who you think can benefit from listening to Paul's story. And we will see you next week on GovCon Unscripted.
Thanks again. Take care.
Thanks for listening to this episode of GovCon Unscripted with your host, Chelsea Roberts. Do you have a GovCon story or need guidance in government contracting? Connect with Chelsea on LinkedIn to be a guest on the show or to enhance your business strategy. Don't forget, your network is your net worth. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with your growing GovCon community.